that, when you start trying to elevate women to policymaker roles or professionally just for the sake of having women sit in those seats, it really doesn't work out. I think if you look for qualified women that bring a unique perspective and have a value system that prizes sort of hard work to get there, you're going to have better results.
Hello. Welcome again to the episode of the Let People Prosper show. My name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today I'm delighted to bring on someone who knows a lot about what women are facing in their careers, also looking at how to break open some of the policy discussions that we have and aren't having in many cases. And it's none other than Stacy Blakeley. Stacy, welcome to the Let People Prosper show.
I'm so delighted to be here.
Well, it's really a pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. We've got a lot to talk about. So before we get going too far into it, let me go ahead and give the audience your bio, and then we'll jump right into it. So Stacy Blakeley brings 25 years of professional experience to her role as executive director of the Policy Circle. Her career commenced at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. as a staffer for the House Majority Leader, Dick Armey. She transitioned from planning events for political leaders and diplomats to events marketing and corporations, including Dean Foods, BMW, AT&T, and Exxon. In 2004, Stacy pursued her lifelong dream to become an attorney and graduated from Southern Methodist University Dedman School of Law in Dallas. As a nonprofit consultant, Stacy has helped numerous nonprofits raise millions of dollars. She currently serves on the board of directors for Wesmore, the Marketing and Communications Task Force for Girls, the C-Level Advisory Board for Forward, and the Legacy Council for Fair Park. Stacy and her husband have 2 teen daughters and 5 grandchildren. So with all that being said, Stacy, why do you do what you do every day?
You know what, Vance, thank you for that. And I'll tell you, I get to travel all around the country, really coast to coast. I've got the frequent flyer miles to prove it. And one of the best things that I get to do is to meet with women who are in their communities, identifying needs, opportunities, and problems. And with the Policy Circle, they have the tools and the information they need to go be solutions oriented. And every day we get up and we learn more about what these women are doing. These are busy women. They're wearing many hats, and yet they're prioritizing their civic life and their commitment to their community. And I mean, that's what really fuels not only my work, but our whole team.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And how did you get to this point? I saw, your background, and you've been at a lot of different places. What got you interested in this, in helping women build their careers and everything else?
Well, I would say it's divine intervention, honestly.
There you go.
I had many twists and turns in my career, but I'll tell you, I feel like every experience I've ever had led me to this place and this time. And it was through relationships, which I think we all know professionally is the name of the game, is you get introduced to folks. They find out you're working on a project. You find, people that have similar interests or passions. And there's this really terrific connector. She actually runs Forward, that organization that you mentioned, Diane Pattison. And she said, hey, there's a woman in Chicago that's put together this amazing organization. You two should talk. And then whenever I sat down with Sylvie Legere, the founder, it was just like, oh my gosh, I finally found sort of my intellectual peer. She operated as fast as I like to. And just the minute I started working on Policy Circle projects and then eventually transitioned to full time, it checked every box, like my little political junkie box, my legal analysis, my communications and marketing. And so I just, the encouragement for anybody out there is if you're in some point in your career and you think, this isn't quite it, those experiences will be valuable to you, or you're going to use them at some point in time in the future. So, they can all be redeemed.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, one of the things that I've kind of learned or kind of live by is that we build from our past. Our past really helped to get us to where we are today. And, I've talked about it on the show before, but I grew from pretty humble background, single mom. My dad had epilepsy, so I was on disability. And, I was a drummer for a rock band for a while, and I got in a bad car accident. It was lifeline at Herman Hospital in Houston. And really by the grace of God, it kind of put me in a whole other direction. First generation college student to get a PhD in economics. And now I'm working on policy work that I never thought possible. We got to work in the White House and everything else. And it's amazing. What I feel like God has put us in these paths to do what we do today. And so I love hearing your story and so many others that are out there. It's really remarkable of all the things that you're doing and have done and will continue to do. What are some of the highlights though? Like what are some of the things that you do now every day that you get excited about whenever you go to work or anything else?
Well, I love what we're doing today. I'm always excited to share more about the policy circle and hopefully introduce, new audiences and, identify folks that might want to work with us. The other thing that I really love working on is we produce policy circle briefs. So we have about 75 of these in our brief library. We cover everything from mental health to the Middle East, and we have an amazing brief team, but it's a lot of fun and to tackle a new topic, to think about why this is relevant. We always look at the history and is there a constitutional question and what's the economic impact? That's very important to us. And so digging into these topics, we get to meet experts and authors and filmmakers and policymakers. So that is always fascinating. And it's always great to be more educated on a topic. So I enjoy that. And I'd say the other thing right now is we're in growth mode. And so we have been scaling and working on a strategic plan. And so you know how it is when you're putting pencil to paper and really thinking about what impact do we want to have. We're approaching our 10-year anniversary at the Policy Circle. So what does the next 10 years look like? Super energizing.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a new initiative that you have coming out called Faith and Civic Life. What is all that about?
You know what? I think as we were putting together briefs and hosting circles around the country, we were started to get curious about what is the fabric of the neighborhood? What is the heartbeat of the communities? What makes America unique? And so much for our nation's history, faith communities were a real driver of civic engagement, of civic pride, that people's satisfaction with their communities and neighborhoods. And with the decline of sort of faith and faith-based activities, you see a real decline in civic life. We see a decline in civility and more polarization. Those two are interconnected. And so we decided to create a brief where we talk about religious history and the role of, how faith and government intersect. And then we also look at the power of faith-based institutions. You really, you're working on policy. I'm sure you look at this quite a bit, but there are so many areas from refugees and resettlement and foster care and things of that nature, where the very best outcomes are these organizations that have been doing this for a long time and they're faith-based. And so our goal is really to help people integrate their faith and values into how they vote, to how they operate as policymakers, and then ultimately to think about how can you do work in the square that aligns with your values.
Yeah, that's great. And that's needed right now as we see that maybe it's missing. Too often it's missing with the faith and the civic life and everything else and those values throughout the country on so many policy issues. It seems like we get caught up in a lot of the debate about what the specifics are about a specific topic, whether it be immigration or trade or the minimum wage or whatever the policy is. But oftentimes I think, at least to me, it seems like we don't think about people as being people. They just become another number that's out there in the system. And what I try to bring down on the Let People Prosper show and a lot of my work is to really think about that these are all people. And we got to remember that sometimes. And so what are some of the big policy discussions that you have at the Policy Circle that others should be aware of and be informed about?
So, I think no matter which topic we're talking about, Vance, we end up very often coming back to education, that core, the foundation. and, that's a hot topic no matter what. And, we partner with some amazing groups to talk about parental empowerment and choice, which I'm pretty sure you're part of those conversations as well.
Yes.
And so education is always up at the top of the roster, whether it's, improving K through 12, reforming higher ed, giving parents more choice. We have an amazing brief on literacy. And once you read the brief, you realize we should all be talking about the literacy crisis in this country and how that's going to have generational impact on prosperity, on opportunities. And I just think it's a huge issue. And, we have several briefs on foreign policy. And given what's going on in the world right now, we find that those have a lot of traction. And I'll tell you what's interesting is of our 25 million web impressions last year, 40% were 18 to 24 years old. And I don't know if they're just looking up our briefs for writing a paper or whatever they're doing. But we're really encouraged that perhaps there are some in that younger demographic that are looking for facts. They want something nonpartisan, and they'll move beyond TikTok, right, for their news, which is great. But really some of the other issue I'll tell you that's really been no surprise either at the forefront is our brief on immigration. And trying to wrap your head around that issue is tough. And putting it in a concise brief, there are challenges with that, but we wanted to give people baseline facts. How did we get here? And then where do we go? And then what role can you play, even at that most local level, to try to be solutions oriented and not just get caught up in political theater?
Yeah, that's important. And I'll be sure to put, and these are great briefs, by the way, for the audience. I'll be sure to put all these, some links to this on the show notes page at vanceginn.substack.com. So we'll have that information available for folks that want to go and look at this. I also know that there's a lot of great work that you're doing at the Policy Circle with other groups, as you mentioned, and one of those being with Meg Tazinski, who is at SMU at the Bridwell Institute for Global Markets and Freedom, who's been on the show before talking about economic freedom and how she's been able to incorporate her work and the work through the Policy Circle of getting the women's careers and their economic freedom within the larger index that they've been using, and done some great research on that. But I wanted to hear your perspective on kind of that project and what's been going on there.
I'll tell you, one of our co-founders, Angela Brawley, was CEO of a massive healthcare company, and she's super devoted to making sure that women really thrive professionally. And she met, I think, Meg, and they started having this conversation, like you said, about this economic freedom index and how no one had ever studied women and economic freedom in the same way. And especially if you think about it on an international stage, there are many places where women do not have the same opportunities that men do to get access to credit or to get access to, loans, or in many places it's illegal. They're not allowed to even get an education if you think about it. And so that was kind of that first layer. And then we started looking at it as an opportunity for the Policy Circle to use our unique model, the briefs we create, and the conversations that we have around them, leveraging this incredible data that Meg and several of their scholars put together, examining really important things for us here, like what's the impact of mandates? How does, caregiving impact your career trajectory? How does the demands of career impact how big families are and the population issues that we see from that. And so we've unpacked that with Meg and a number of scholars. They produced a specialized journal just on this issue. And then we've hosted several events where Meg has been able to speak to our community and really just kind of open up some new doors, because the women and economic freedom conversation, it crosses political lines, and it's one that we need to be having right now.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And that research by Meg and others has been fantastic. I mean, there's so many papers that come in and talk about this. And I've worked with the Economic Freedom of North America folks and also the Economic Freedom of the World folks. And I think this was a great addition to looking at the benefits of economic freedom, because, too often it can just be another number, kind of like whenever we don't treat people like people, these can just be another numbers. But freedom is so important to our way of life, whether it's men or women, and our kids and everything else that's out there. It's really important. And it really shows that the more economic freedom that we have, particularly like in the United States compared to some other places, maybe in the Middle East, especially for women, that the economic benefits to them are so much larger. And that also contributes to other benefits in their lives. And it's not just about the dollars and cents, but just having the economic or faith freedom. There's so many other freedoms that we could talk about. It's one of the things too, Stacy, where my show is to let people prosper, but I'm not talking about just prosperity in the form of material prosperity. That certainly is a part of it, but it's also psychological prosperity, spiritual, societal. There's a lot of things that go into this. And too often, going back to our discussion earlier about faith and civic life, which I'm excited about all the work you're doing with that as well, is it seems like the family is taking such a big hit in many, many ways throughout the policy world and, and other things that are going on. And I'm hopeful that the institution of the family, which, a big part of my economic background is institutions matter. And I think the family really matters. And trying to figure out how best should we be looking at the family to allow for more freedom and better opportunities. And that includes for women, of course. But I wonder from your perspective and what you've seen and talked to across the country, what are some of the issues that are really facing families today?
Last year at our Policy Circle Leadership Summit, we had a conversation about this. And we had Brad Wilcox on, who's at the Center for Family and Marriage. Yeah. And then we have Dr. Melissa Carney, who wrote the book, The Two-Parent Privilege. And it was such a robust conversation. It really sparked a lot, I think, amongst our attendees. And there's a virtual recording of this too that's on the Policy Circle's YouTube channel, which I'd recommend folks take a look at. But I think as you look at the broader, there is a ripple effect. So just like you said, with women and economic freedom, when you have women that have economic security and opportunity, there's a ripple effect to their families, their friends, their peers, their community. And likewise, when you have these economic decisions being made where people are not getting married, they're not having children. Okay, well, the impact of this, and we're seeing this across, is, not only does it impact the fabric of our nation, which has always been rooted in the family unit, it starts to impact our ability to thrive economically, to have a workforce, to have, thriving education. And so part of what we do at the Policy Circle, Vance, is try to help people connect the dots. And because none of these policy issues happen in a vacuum. And so, you look at economic freedom and then suddenly to your point, you're looking at, okay, well, what are the other freedoms that might be under attack? And if you have a shrinking family unit, what does that do, to our nation's ability to continue to grow and to thrive? And so, I think what we really enjoy doing too is helping people not only just connect the dots between the policy issues, but thinking about, okay, how can your actions actually change, right? The outcomes for some of these challenges. And whether it's you getting involved at the local level or just being really thoughtful about who you elect, and are they going to implement family-friendly policies? Are they going to create more barriers for families to have the economic stability they need? And are they actually going to start thinking, gosh, well, women have some unique roles as caregivers and breadwinners, and we might need to think about that. It's a novel idea.
Yeah, no, I agree. It reminds me some of the work that was done by Robert Putnam for a number of years on bowling alone. I've read the two-parent household. Is that the name of it? Melissa Kearney. I've read that.
Two-parent privilege.
Yeah, there you go. Two-Parent Privilege. Great book. You should go check that out as well. Brad Wilcox, like you said, he does some great work there. It's interesting to me because I do a lot of work on poverty initiatives as well. A lot of my work's on fiscal policy and monetary policy and some of the stuff that's out there in school choice. I'm a huge advocate for school choice, like you mentioned earlier. But barriers to work is another big one for me. And whether it be occupational licensing or other factors that are out there. And from some of the research that I've seen, this especially influences women being in the labor force. And I think that's unfortunate. And one of the areas where I hope we can find more ways of rolling the government back, so that way we do have more freedom to work and have that dignity of work and everything else. And but with that, and I'd love for you to respond to that. But another thing that I was just thinking about is, how do you also deal with the issue of women going to work, but also women who want to stay home, and the changing of the family where some more men stay home? I mean, I work from home now. My wife does too. And some of the other changes that go on with the family. How do you see some of these things working together for careers for women in the future?
I'll tell you, the policy circle is 100% remote.
Yeah.
And what that enables us to do is, I think, attract some amazing talent who otherwise would not be able to, go into the office every day, or they would be in career tracks. Like, I used to practice law, and it was, how do you first to be in the office in the morning, last to leave was kind of your badge. And, it wasn't really a very healthy lifestyle. It was certainly difficult. I had both my daughters in law school. And so I had young children and trying to start a career. They didn't care. There was no flexibility. And so I think there's some great things that have come out of sort of this shift to virtual work. And I think it gives women a lot of opportunities to pursue high level, high skill jobs, but they're still able to balance that out with their obligations and the different things that they have going on professionally and personally. So it's not easy, because as you know, when you work from home, you've got to balance distractions, and and then you never turn off your work, because it's kind of overlaps with your personal life. And I still think there's a lot of pressure for women, but I think there's a big shift in recognizing, you do have a real life outside of job hours and your job duties. And there's more recognition that I think if you accept that whole person, you actually kind of get, I think, better performance, more engagement, and more commitment to the mission of for us, a nonprofit, or, for a corporation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I was thinking about, when you look at the numbers from the economics part of it, right? When you look at labor force participation, we had a huge influx of women in the labor force after the 1960s. So it's speaking of freedoms and everything else going on there, which was huge. And there has been a reduction in men in the labor force over time. I'm not necessarily saying there's a substitution effect that's going on there, but those are the things that have been happening. It's going to be interesting what the future holds. For example, in colleges right now, I think it's close to 60% of those that are in college are now women, which is going to be interesting for the future, for careers and everything else that's going on. But do you find some of that as well within your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is you have these higher numbers of women graduating from college, and you have, an increased amount of women in grad school. There's more, women graduating from law school. But then you still look at the numbers in the C-suite and the partnership track and law firms, it's still really low. And even though the policy circle, part of the reason that we were even founded was there were too few women sitting in seats discussing policy, especially economic impact of policy. Women were kind of getting, if you will, relegated. Like, are you going to talk about reproductive rights and education? Well, no, we want to talk about the economic impact, and we want to talk about housing and immigration and taxes. I think we need to be aware, like, women want to talk about a lot of these issues. And so that was one of the reasons, though, that we started. And then we started looking at representation. And you've seen real growth in women sitting in elected seats at the state and national level. You have not seen that same level of growth really in the C-suite. And I think it's because there are still many environments, like we were just talking about before, where there is no flexibility. And they don't really realize that bringing all those skill sets to the table is really valuable for the organization. I mean, there's some progress, but we've got a lot of women that get out of college ready to go, ready to build a career, but they also want to build a family, and they're forced to make a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What do you think about, given what you said there, what about this idea or this push now to get rid of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and having that sort of approach, whether it be in academia or in the C-suites and everything else? Do you have a position on DEI?
Well, I think, as an organization, we really like to focus on meritocracy and what works for individuals, especially when that's rooted in personal freedom and a level of agency. A couple of the scholars, that we really have worked with, is Jason Riley and Ian Rowe, if you're familiar with their work.
Yeah.
And so much of what they talk about is that, DEI is actually a detriment to people being recognized for their unique skills, their abilities. Instead, you get lumped in with this, characterization that you're a DEI or a diversity hire, which in many respects is insulting. It's insulting to women. It's insulting to people of color because you want to be sitting in those seats and be recognized for what your contribution is, not being lumped in to just some category. Based on immutable characteristics. And so I think when you look at, especially some of the work that Meg and Tazinski and Ann Bradley did through Bridwell, they showed that mandates actually harm women as opposed to providing a professional benefit. And so, I think the data pans out, and I think we can think about this just logically and ethically that, when you start trying to elevate women to policymaker roles or professionally just for the sake of having women sit in those seats, it really doesn't work out. I think if you look for qualified women that bring a unique perspective and have a value system that prizes sort of hard work to get there, you're going to have better results.
Yeah. Yeah, no, great points there. One of the things that we hear a lot about, right, is that women earn about 77 cents or 78 cents per hour compared to men. Meg and I talked about this some, but basically they're using average wages of men versus average wages of women. Sometimes they'll even use median, but there's still kind of this difference that goes on here. But of course, that doesn't account for the majors that the women were taking versus men, or the hours worked, or all the other factors that really go into play. There's a lot of other things that are happening where it's not apples to apples comparison. Have you looked into that issue as well?
Yeah, I think some of the work that we have in our Women in Economic Freedom talks a little bit about that pay gap. And I agree with you. I think there's some disagreement about how that data is gathered and what factors are built into that. And, that's not something we focus on. I'll be honest with you, Vance, a lot. It's touched on in the Women in Economic Freedom brief. I think for us, we're trying to look at broader issues and how more women can thrive and sit in seats of influence. I think a lot of times, especially you with your policy background, if you are sitting around the table where decisions are made that impact your family, that impact your business, instead of just being reactionary to that, it makes a huge difference for you professionally and personally. And so, we can get fixated on perhaps, some of those gaps. But at the end of the day, we are probably better off if we focus on opportunity and how we have more women involved in the decision-making process. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's true too. No matter if you look at the national level or economies or something else, it's important to have as many people as possible, because the more people you have working together, whether it's men or women, or that allows for them to have more opportunities, not only for innovations and technology, but to work together and come up with new capital and new equipment and new things and new innovations and productivity that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And so I think that's something that's kind of beautiful about the marketplace, is when we let the market work, whether employers and workers all coming together in these exchanges, it really allows for them to do what's best for them, and then for each other in the process to bring about something even better. And so the more that we can have economic freedom for women and for men along the way, but especially for women who haven't had those same freedoms for so long, I think the much better off that we're going to be. And we're already seeing kind of the fruits of those benefits now. I'm really hopeful for what the future is going to hold. And so speaking of the future, what are some things that you really hope to see happen to bring about more economic freedom or other sort of policy issues that you're really working on?
Well, part of our core values at the Policy Circle is, looking for entrepreneurial solutions, driving, community change through innovation. And so, we're really focusing on getting women informed and then equipped. And so, we've built out a leadership program. It's 3 months. It's virtual. It starts with founding principles. Then you have to engage with local lawmakers. And then out of that, we've developed a program called ASAP, which is our all-state appointments project. And that's really trying to get more women sitting in those seats, commissions, boards, task force. And we really see this as a pathway to have more influence and opportunity by being informed and equipped. One of our slogans is be more curious, less furious. And there's something to be said for when you get frustrated and you're not happy with the status quo. But if you can't channel that into something constructive, then we're just going to see more of the dysfunction that we have right now. You're going to see more people left on the sidelines and left behind, either with how the workforce is changing. You look at we're really talking quite a bit about AI and technology at the policy circle, how that's going to change really every role, from how we're just going to be citizens and caregivers, how we're going to work, and build our professional lives. It's all going to be impacted by that. And so we always try to kind of keep an eye for what's next. And that age of intelligence is really going to have an impact. And I think, sadly, our lawmakers are still sitting around scratching their heads trying to figure out social media that's been around for 15 years. So if we can get more women well-versed and comfortable and confident, maybe we can get ahead of the curve and actually harness some of this for good while mitigating the risk, because we know there's plenty of harm that comes out of it too.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're seeing that take place right now. I mean, whether in Texas, where we are, and all the AI and potential regulations, or out of the Biden administration, there's talk about AI regulations. And one of the things I'm kind of curious, or where I'm looking at AI and other things, is I really think that it's also part of our next economic revolution. At some point, we still have to harness it and say, you know what, we can't just combat everything that's going to change for the future, because many people are really concerned, and maybe rightfully so. But remember, people were also concerned about it when we had the T-model Ford come about that was going to overthrow or throw out a lot of the horse and buggy. I don't know about you, Stacy, but I'm glad we're not riding horse and buggies anymore. While I do think that there will be some obstacles with AI and new technologies and social media for our kids and everything else, it's also going to be important for us, in my view, to not come in and want to ban everything or to block everything, because we want parents to be parents. Going back to faith and civic life, I hope that I'm bringing my kids up with my Christian faith to say, look, these are good things for you to do. And understand that, yes, you're going to make some failures. I've made a lot of failures, a lot of them throughout my years. But I learned from them in the process. And Stacy, it seems like to me sometimes we want everybody to succeed, which I do. I want people to prosper. But failure, unfortunately, is a thing that helps us learn. I don't know if that's how you view it or not, but that's kind of how I view it. What do you think about failure?
Oh my gosh, I think it's the ingredient to success. I mean, if you don't fail, and if you don't try new things, you're not going to get to the next level. I mean, as a nonprofit, we're really entrepreneurial, and sadly, we don't have a culture in this country where, they prize innovation and risk taking in the nonprofit world like they do in the for-profit world. And if you don't get out there and try new things, and if you don't encourage, that's a big part of our community, is get uncomfortable. Step out of your comfort zone, step into the arena. The great Teddy Roosevelt quote, it's not the critic that count, it's the man in the arena, and even if you fail, at least you stepped out. At least you tried. And that is totally baked into our DNA. It's really been a part of my life. There are different things I look back on and think, well, that was a bust. Okay. But I learned from it. I grew from it. And I think some humility and having a little grace for yourself and for others, it's part of that process too.
Yeah. Amen. I totally agree with that. As we're wrapping up some now, I'm not a woman, so I don't have all the understanding and maybe some of the issues that's going on. Okay. And so I'm thinking through, and for the audience, and I'm just like, okay, well, what can we do next? So you've brought a lot of good ideas already, and a lot of it's going to be go to the Policy Circle website, and let's make sure we're reading this, we're getting educated about what's happening, we're talking to legislators, we're talking to staff and others who are important influencers and are making policy changes. But what are some of the other things that are just, day-to-day activities that maybe are on the minds of a lot of women across the country? I know that across the country right now, 58% of Americans believe we're in a recession, even though some of the other headline numbers aren't telling us that right now. But are there still a lot of struggles that are happening that still need to be overcome for women across even America, if not the globe?
Well, I would say there's some universal things first, and this is for men and women. Disinformation, misinformation, and the inability to discern fact from fiction is a real problem. Just to your exact point. I mean, the impression and what people think is going on versus the reality is just somewhat disturbing. And I think that we all need to be more discerning in how we, consume information. I think we need to be rigorous when it comes to choosing our sources. And one of my preachers used to say, you turn into what you tune into. Maybe there's some pundits we shouldn't be listening to. Maybe we should be a little more selective. And so I would say that applies to men and women. I would say the other thing that I would encourage women to do is really embrace their unique position in their families, in the workplace, in the education world, and, look for ways to bring people into informed and civil discussions. And, this can be intimidating. It can be nerve-wracking. Like, okay, well, what if everybody doesn't agree with me? And I think women tend to want to know all the facts. They want to read the book and listen to the podcast before they even ask a question. And no offense, Vance, but very often men do not have that same hesitation. And so I think for us, it's get informed, but also step out there, because you probably know more than you think you do. And you can do a heck of a lot more than you've probably done because you've self-sidelined. And that would be my biggest encouragement to the women that are part of this call, and even to the men, and looking at the women in your life. Encourage the women around you to step up, to lift them up, and to let them know they have a unique contribution to make, but they need to be informed. They need to be credible. They need to build relationships. So when they step up to the plate, they're ready to go.
Yeah, well put. Wise words there as well, Stacy. I mean, so there's some research behind that too that shows that women tend to be more risk averse than riskier like men, which can be good and bad depending on the situation that we're talking about. And so, but you're right. I mean,
and then they don't apply. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, it's all about what situation you're in, and let's make sure that we're trying to get more out of that wherever you are. One thing could be asking for raises whenever you need to ask for a raise, or looking for another job. There's a lot of other factors that go into play. And one of the things that I've learned over time, building on my past sort of approach, is that the worst they can say is no. And so I can take that as a no and then move on. And if at the end of the day I don't want to be there anymore, well, I'll try something else.
Listen, I have this little quote on my desk that says, say yes when you can say yes. I probably should have another quote of, don't be destroyed by a no, because, I'm a fundraiser, right? I got to raise money. You're going to get no's, but you're certainly not going to get a yes if you don't ask. And it's that same situation, right? The data around men will apply for a job even if they only meet like half the qualifications, and women want to have more than enough qualifications. And so they're just missing opportunities. And so I mean, there's a lot of this that we need to put back. Yes, encourage, and yes, open doors, but women are going to have to step into some of these roles and take some risk and not be devastated by some rejection, because it's going to come with leadership. Leadership is going to mean you're going to be in the crosshairs.
Yeah. Again, wise words. As we're really closing up here now, because I love this conversation, I want to keep it going. Two good books I was just thinking about one is Grit, where you keep working hard and work through things.
Yes.
But there's another good book called Quit, where quit is also really important. you need both of them in order to have a prosperous career, I believe. And the last question I have for you, before I want to hear more about how to reach out to you, is right now we have a vice president who is a woman, and we have a potential president who could be a woman. Do you think this is also helpful for career choices and everything else for women for the future?
I think it can be. I also think there's a big risk, and that is, you have a woman in this role that doesn't do a good job. And then it's like, okay, well, women shouldn't be sitting in that seat. There's always that risk that there's going to be mass generalizations around one person's performance. I do think it's important to see women in, leadership roles. And I think you've got a bunch of tech companies that are run by women. You've got big investment firms and banks. And so to have the highest, executive office in the land held by a woman could be good. But I also think that is going to be tempered by, are there going to be policies and a culture implemented there that does reward women who work hard, who put in the effort and sit in those seats because they deserve to be there, not because they're just women that somebody thought, oh, we need another woman on the board. That doesn't work. Yeah. And that's not healthy for us as a country.
Yeah. It's been a wild election year in many ways. And that's been another one.
Oh, my God.
We didn't even get into any of that. But
no, we could have a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Stacy, this has really been fantastic. Where could the audience find more about you and Policy Circle, and anything else that you'd like to share before we go?
Well, they can always take a look at thepolicycircle.org and, check out our resources that are available. And then, appreciate anybody who wants to follow me on LinkedIn. I frequently share events and books and articles. And, we really have a lot going on at the Policy Circle all around the country. Like you mentioned, the Faith and Civic Life, we're kicking off with an event in Washington, D.C. on September 30th. We're going to have Governor Youngkin and the First Lady of Virginia, and talking about how faith has shaped their civic journey. We're also going to have other folks there talking about religious freedom and how to integrate your faith. Even if you're sitting in a policymaking seat, how do you build coalitions? How do you work with communities of faith? So we have a lot of terrific events. So if you get on LinkedIn, you can learn more, you can get an invitation. And the other thing I would just say is, for either the people that are listening, or if they think about people in their life, they want to get more involved, but they just don't know where to start. The Policy Circle is a terrific place for them to develop skills and knowledge. And it's really, I think, a wonderful launching point, but it's also a community of established leaders that help one another, share best practices. And so we'd love for anybody that's interested to join and grow with us as we build this thriving community of solutions-oriented, get-her-done kind of women, as we would say in Texas.
Yeah, I love that. Well, great work that you're doing there at the Policy Circle, Stacy. Keep it going, and thank you for being on the Let People Prosper show, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you so much, Vance.
Well, for the audience, thank you for listening today. I hope you learned something. I know I did. Go out and give us a 5-star rating and share this with your friends and family wherever you listen to your podcast. And remember, you can find all the show notes at vanceginn.substack.com, or just go to vanceginn.com. I'll have it there as well. And until next time, let people prosper.